for Ukraine?
I hope that they decide to follow President Trump and his team's lead on this, because let's not forget, until President Trump was elected, there was no European leader even working toward peace. In fact, it was scuttled back in 2022 by the EU. And I think quietly in the background, some of these leaders may have been working against the efforts to reach a negotiated peace settlement, encouraging Ukraine and Zelensky to have unrealistic expectations of what this is going to be.
Hey guys, I'm Mike, and in this video, you're about to watch a Trump ally come under real pressure, first over Donald Trump's handling of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then over something even harder to defend, his clear double standard on free speech. If you enjoy thoughtful discussions like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always great to see people around the world sharing perspectives here. Let's watch the clip together.
So the new White House national security strategy talks about wanting Ukraine to survive as a viable state, but is being asked to give up territory that Ukraine holds to Russia compatible with being a viable state? I mean, do you think Donald Trump would regard himself as the leader of a viable state if he was asked to give up parts of Texas to Mexico?
But you're actually conflating two things, and this is irrelevant. The fact is that Ukraine has no pathway to win this war. President Trump and his team are attempting to, I believe, de-escalate this war and get this process on a good glide path to find first a ceasefire and then an end to the hostilities. He wants to make sure that Ukraine, and you can read that right in the national security strategy. It's not a long read. It's available publicly. It's a public document. So we can see that President Trump wants Ukraine to remain a sovereign nation, as he hopes the rest of Europe and the UK will remain sovereign nations. At America First Policy Institute, we look at the America First agenda and we say, let's have our allies have a nation first agenda: secure borders, controlled immigration, protection of the rule of law, affordable and abundant energy, protection of your beautiful culture, freedom of speech, if that's part of your constitution, the fact that every nation should put their citizens first, a credible defense, make sure that you can be a viable country and secure. We need that in every one of our allies.
Now, a big theme for Donald Trump is free speech. And in this new White House document, it accuses Europe of censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition. But isn't that exactly what the Trump administration is doing in the United States? I'm thinking of how in September, President Trump celebrated ABC's suspension of the critic Jimmy Kimmel, his show. That was great news for America. And in July, Donald Trump filed that lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch over its reporting of his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. So it's OK for President Trump to limit free speech in the US, but not OK for that to happen in Europe.
Not at all. So free speech is the foundation of our shared, I would say especially UK and US, our shared values. How we got free speech in the United States was from the UK, from hundreds of years ago. And so if we can maintain that, we will be able to have open societies. Once you allow one side to decide what is acceptable speech and not acceptable speech, you have a totalitarian government, because then you will have no free exchange of ideas. And it is happening. Just in Ireland, Enoch Burke, a teacher, because he wouldn't use a student's pronouns. Sorry, he's been jailed now and he'll be in prison over Christmas.
Carla Sands, may I politely say that you're evading my question? And the question is that Donald Trump seems to be happy to go to courts to impose limits on free speech in your country and then lecture Europe about imposing limits on free speech over in Europe.
If he sues a network or entity, a newspaper, it's because they have done something that's broken the law. Otherwise, he wouldn't waste his time. He absolutely works to maintain his reputation. He doesn't allow himself to be taken advantage of by these networks. And most of them have been working lockstep with the leftist Democrats in the United States.
But if you believe in free speech, if you believe in that, I think it's the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, that is an unequivocal principle. You stand by that. You don't go to the courts when you don't like what people are saying.
Well, when it's unfair or illegal activity, you do go to the courts. But absolutely, I would say most people who are part of the circle of America First do believe absolutely in free speech. We're really worried about this Digital Services Act that the EU has passed, because I do believe that that is a kind of war against the United States. They are working to fine companies like Elon Musk, because he allows free speech. They're attempting to censor the speech in the United States of U.S. citizens. That is blatantly not okay. And it is, I believe, it's a gray zone act of war and must end.
Let me stop holding you up and get straight to what I think about this, because I'm genuinely sitting here wondering whether we're all watching the same reality. The level of hypocrisy on display is difficult to ignore. Anyone closely tied to Donald Trump lecturing other countries about free speech feels almost surreal when you step back and look at the full record. This is someone who regularly scolds the UK and European countries over supposed limits on expression, while at the same time backing crackdowns on protests, journalists, and critics here at home. We've watched people living in the United States, people still protected by the First Amendment, detained, removed, and in some cases deported after engaging in speech or activism the administration didn't like. And yet, somehow, Trump continues to position himself as a global authority on free expression. He praises the First Amendment constantly. He does it domestically, and he does it when he's overseas, telling the world that free speech is the backbone of democracy. But the pattern never really changes. The moment someone criticizes Trump or his allies, the response is rarely tolerance or debate. Instead, it's lawsuits, public threats, pressure campaigns, or calls for people to lose their jobs. That contradiction is impossible to ignore. He rails against so-called cancel culture abroad, while actively encouraging boycotts and punishment campaigns against American companies, journalists, and public figures who oppose him. He claims to defend free speech online, yet repeatedly pushes legal pressure and policy changes aimed at platforms that moderated or restricted his own posts. Free speech, in this framework, seems to apply only when it benefits him. And then you see powerful tech executives sitting beside him, smiling, offering praise, and signaling cooperation. At that point, it starts to feel less like open collaboration and more like quiet intimidation. You can't help but wonder what conversations are happening behind closed doors and what kind of pressure is being applied when cameras aren't rolling. As for Carla Sands, every appearance like this chips away at her credibility. When she's pressed directly on these contradictions, the defenses don't hold, the answers shift, the logic bends, and that's because, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to defend a position that simply doesn't add up. Donald Trump does not consistently respect the First Amendment, and that inconsistency is exactly why his treatment of critics feels increasingly authoritarian to so many people. The comparisons people make to other strongman leaders aren't random or hyperbolic. They come from observable behavior, from how dissent is handled, not from rhetoric alone. So I want to hear from you. Does Donald Trump really have the standing to lecture anyone about free speech? Or is this just another example of one set of rules for everyone else and a completely different set for him? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And while you're there, hit the like button to help the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. I'm Mike, and I'll see you in the next clip.